So every morning I drive over to Stone Mountain from Atlanta for a jog around the 5 mile loop as a bit of a warm-up. Then I would sprint up the mountain once or twice to finish off. There was only one rocky part of the mountain cleared for going up and down, and it was the less steep side of the mountain, near the main entrance, that is. That time of the morning there was either nobody else or there was maybe like one other person. One morning, I'd been on the loop and was about a mile or two in. This was one loop with a mountain in the middle, and there was no shortcut or alternate way back. And a white van with no windows drives by kind of slow. I took note of that, of course, but keep going as it was my only option. A while later, the van comes back around from behind again, and I started to get seriously alerted because I hadn't seen anybody else out there at that point, and I was pretty well out in the middle of nowhere. The van drives past and disappears around the curve, but then comes around towards me even slower. I was good and scared at that point and started to run a good bit faster and tried to make myself look tough and menacing as I ran. The van kept going past without stopping, so I tried to talk myself into just it being a maintenance worker or something and thanked my lucky stars that everything was okay. Well, it wasn't okay, and about a minute later the van had turned around and came back up behind me again and pulled up just ahead of me and stopped as I was running towards it. I was trying to quickly figure out what the heck to do and had to come to a stop when I saw the back doors of the van fly open towards me. I knew that I couldn't outrun a van in either direction, so I immediately decided my only option was to sprint up the mountain as fast as I could and hope to outrun them. Being so used to running up the mountain daily and seeing how easily I blew past other people not used to going up it every day, I figured that I had a good shot at outrunning just about anybody. So I busted my butt up the rocky, woody, thick-brushed mountain as fast as I could. This person took after me, but I did not look back once. It was really hard. There was no clear path, and I had to dodge stuff and run in jagged directions to get away. I heard him behind me for what seemed like about maybe a minute, and then I didn't hear anything after that. I still didn't look back, just kept busting upwards as fast as I could. I got to the top, checked my scrapes, and caught my breath before rushing back down the cleared path and back to my car. I never saw anyone else or the van after that, although I was scared to death and on high alert until I got into my car. There was a welcome center down near the entrance, but at that time it just wasn't open. This was before cell phones as well, so I got in my car as fast as I could and I headed back home feeling so lucky and fortunate that I was able to get away that day. I didn't go back there in the mornings anymore after that and didn't go back for a while afterwards out of fear. But when I finally did start going back, I always took pepper spray and didn't start going out until later in the day when there were others out there as well. I have no idea what was up with that guy or what he was going to do to me or trying to do, but still, all these years later, I can't come up with anything feasible that wasn't likely to be seriously bad or, who knows, maybe would have ended my life. Also, he never said anything, he just chased me. I did call the police when I got home and told them what happened, and they just took a note of what I reported, and that was it. After that, I never heard anything else. So, this just happened last night. My boyfriend, our husky, and I embarked upon our long holiday road trip to see our families earlier today. 14 hours of this trip takes place on a major US interstate highway. We were looking for places to make our last gas stop and found a place just off the highway. We pulled off and into the desolate gas station and immediately were greeted by a fairly large, somewhat sketchy man taking not so subtle glances in our direction. We were both sort of joking that maybe we chose the wrong gas station, and boy, we did. My boyfriend suggested that while he pumped the gas and run to the restroom that I take our dog and let him stretch his legs. Being a city girl, I know to always carry my mace and phone, especially at night, and so we diverged as I started to make my way towards the ill-lit side of the gas station, and my boyfriend to the restroom. I made it not even 30 feet from my car and was approached by a small chihuahua sort of mutt with a collar, who happily greeted our husky. I looked around for an owner while the two dogs got to know one another, and continued to walk to a patch of grass with our new follower in tow. My first instinct was to help the dog and find the owner, but in the back of my mind, something just felt very off, to be honest. It felt off since the moment that we pulled in fact. I immediately called my boyfriend and told him that I had found a dog and said, "Hey, I found a dog, but something is weird." He immediately abandoned his bathroom break and came out to meet me. While I'm standing with our dog and this dog who came seemingly out of nowhere, I felt eyes on me from the employees working outside. My boyfriend expresses concern about the dog being loose so close to a major highway and further looked around for its possible owner. He approached one of the employees who was changing out trash liners right next to our car for some time now. He asked the employee if he had any idea whose dog this was. In perfect English, he replied, "I don't speak English," and anxiously turned around to only continue to go through the motions of changing out a trash liner that he'd been standing at this whole time. He then continued to watch us chase around this dog until the dog led us behind the store or gas station. With my boyfriend 5 feet behind me, I followed the dog to the back of the store. And behind the store, 10 or so big rig trucks sat largely in darkness, resting for the night. Cardboard boxes and broken wood pallets covered the dirt. A large man in a gas station uniform greeted me, staring through a glass door. With my boyfriend out of view, I bent down to check the dog's tag as the man continued to stare. My boyfriend approached, and that's when the man behind the glass door's demeanor completely changed. Almost dejectedly, he opened the glass door. I quickly asked, "Do you know whose dog this is?" Nervously, he fumbled his words and replied, "Yeah, that's my dog." We both exhaled and exchanged a look as if to say something about that was really weird. We made our way back to the car, and my boyfriend remembered that he still had to use the bathroom, so I settled back into our locked car. And when my boyfriend got back to the car, he told me the same man that we talked to at the back of the store followed him to the bathroom and stood behind him, just watching. I think that's when we realized just how creepy and surreal the last 15 minutes had been. As we drove away, we discussed the strange and creepy series of events, how the whole thing felt staged or set up. I mean, why did the employee act like he didn't know the dog when it belonged to his coworker? We immediately Googled the small town we had stopped in and discovered that apparently it has been a hotspot for human trafficking, and in recent months, as much as 60 people had been arrested. Was this just a string of eerie coincidences, or was there something way more sinister going on here? So this is a little story from when I was growing up in northern Kentucky in the 90s. I would have been around 10, I think, maybe a little bit older, but I'm in my 30s now, and I vividly remember this happening, and I still think about it all the time. So my best friend lived with his grandparents for a bit on several acres of land in Walton, Kentucky, and I spent almost every weekend there. They never really did much with the land. It remained relatively cleared, but there were no farms or structures on it. They had a horse stable near the house, but that was it. And my friend, he'd received a go-kart for his birthday, so we were out driving it around on the open land. It was just the two of us, and we were having a blast riding this thing around. It was getting pretty close to dusk, and we knew that we were going to have to pack it in pretty soon. We came to a stop, and the engine cut out, and almost at the same time, both of us had this really strange feeling come over us. We just felt like we were being watched by something. It's weird how our lizard brains can still even process something like this, but we both agreed that there was just this weird overbearing feeling. We hadn't heard his grandpa's truck, and we were too far out to be seen from the house, so We started looking around. We were in an open field in the middle of their land, and it was surrounded by trees and tall brush, but something caught my eye first, and I got my friend to look in that direction. In the brush, we could see a long, almost black shape sitting very still. Now, I know at this point in the story, most of you are thinking Bigfoot. I can say that I just remember things being dead silent. Even now, I sometimes wonder if it was something else that we saw, but all I remember is thinking that it was a giant, and I mean huge, black wolf. I would guess that it was maybe 200 feet away from us, trying my best to remember. And it was sitting perfectly still, like not even moving an inch. But to me anyway, it looked sort of furry. I couldn't make out any other features like ears or eyes though, but I swear this was what was making us feel watched. It was like when you see a cat getting ready to pounce. That was what it felt like we were looking at. We were both getting really spooked by this point. The sun was going down behind the tree line now, and one of us was going to have to jump out and pull start the engine back up. We were whispering about it, what was watching us. Honestly, I forget which one of us jumped out to and started the cart back up, but when we looked back at where the black shape was, it was gone. The go-kart didn't have lights either, so we just drove as fast as we could back to his grandparents' house, and we told them what we saw. His grandpa said that we probably just saw a coyote or maybe a boar or something, but this shape, man, was long and low, and it was huge, and I don't know, a coyote just doesn't sit well in my head with what I saw. Not to mention, too, that it was like pitch black and furry, which was weird. Anyway, every few years I think about this story, and I've read that there are no wolves in Kentucky anymore anyway. I think that I've just convinced myself that it was a coyote or something, but the memory has stuck in my head all this time for some reason. Nothing else ever happened on his grandparents' land aside from a really bad car accident a few years later and some missing chickens. Again, coyotes would explain all that. And every once in a while, the horses would get really riled up at night, but we would go camping on his land and fishing a lot, and we had a lot of fun around there and never saw anything ever again. Anyway, this is my short little spooky story, and I wish it had a bit more to it, but it's 100% what happened. I found this place and thought that I would share this, and again, it may have been a run-in with a wolf, a coyote, a boar, or who knows, maybe Bigfoot. But whatever it was huge, and it scared the daylight out of us. I'm in my early 20s and female, and about 9 months after I had moved into my place, someone started pounding at my door a little past 11:30 p.m. I was already in bed by this point and was awfully concerned about this person at my door. My upstairs neighbor's aquarium had actually broken the night before, and it was flooding into my living room. Since I had had that fiasco with my neighbor late at night, I figured that it was probably just her again, and almost just opened the door without hesitation. But right before I opened it up, I had this horrible feeling just wash over me. So instead, I meekly said, "Hello?" through the door. I heard a man reply saying, "Hi, I'm a friend of David Jones." And the second that I heard him speak, my blood went cold. I had a terrible feeling about this. David Jones, obviously not his real name, was the name of the previous tenant, and he was a very elderly and disabled guy. He was in a wheelchair and lived with a helper, and he'd passed away before I had moved in. I looked at the people, and he was wearing sunglasses. Again, it was almost midnight, but then I noticed that he had a black face mask, a black hoodie with the hood up, and I said, "Sorry, but David doesn't live here anymore." He pounds his fist on my door again and laughs, saying, "Oh yeah? Open the door and prove it." Like I said, David was in a wheelchair and needed a ramp for the door, which was removed before I ever even moved in. I also drive a motorcycle, and my immediate neighbours don't drive any particular wheelchair-accessible vehicles. With all of this in mind, you would think that someone who feels comfortable enough with David to be knocking down his door in the middle of the night after at least almost a year of no communication would be able to evaluate the situation and see that there are no wheelchair modifications, apologize for the mix-up, and be on their merry way. Well, unfortunately, this wasn't the case. He was still pounding at the door and telling me to open up, and I told him that David wasn't here. I'm not opening the door, and he needs to leave now. He stood outside my place for a few more minutes. I was scared and stood there frozen by the door. Eventually, I saw him walk away, and I was still by my door when I heard someone rustling around by my back door over near where my bedroom is. I was still frozen. I didn't want to believe that someone could actually be by my bedroom window. For clarification, though, the area by my window, it's attached to a common area yard for all of the residents. It's directly off the sidewalk of a relatively busy area, so it isn't completely uncommon to have someone in the yard, but it is certainly uncommon to have someone directly up against your porch and the windows. I had heard something loud happen in my bedroom. I grabbed my pepper spray and cautiously approached the room. No one broke in, but something still seemed really off. After a while, I hadn't seen this person anywhere, so eventually I went back to bed. In the morning, I came out for a smoke, and I saw that my bedroom window screen had been ripped off. It was all bent out of shape and definitely didn't look like it just randomly fell off, and I knew exactly what had happened at that point. That guy ripped off the screen and tried to get in through the bedroom window. Thankfully, it was locked, and I have window jammers, so there was no way that he was going to get in. This obviously frightened me a lot, but there really wasn't much that I could do at this point. Anyway, a few weeks later, someone tried to open my front door in the middle of the day. No knocks, no nothing. I just heard my door clearly trying to be opened. I quickly shot up and ran to the peephole to see a man dressed all in black, hood up with black sunglasses on. He tried the door a couple more times and pushed against it really hard. I was trying to think of something intimidating to say or something to get him to stop. My brain decided that it was a great idea to just hit my door. And surprisingly, it worked though. So I slapped the back of my door really hard, and the guy jumped up 3 feet and just ran away. Now, here is where I think things get just really bizarre. So I googled my address, and everything online for my current residence still lists David Jones and the active resident, and I 100% think that that guy saw me, a young female, all alone, and googled my address and was trying to get my trust into opening this door. I think that after that didn't work, he was still trying to get in, and hence the bedroom window. Him coming back a few weeks later is very weird in my opinion. You would think that he would have either moved on to another target, or perhaps would have been much more interested in getting in sooner. I definitely don't think that he knew David. I don't think he owed him money or was family or anything like that. So the timeline is really strange, but maybe he already had other victims and just decided to try my place again. At any rate, his plan didn't work and he was gone. Literally, months go by, and then someone knocks gently at the door around 9 p.m. one night. I got up to look, and what do you know? An individual covered in black head to toe with sunglasses on. I didn't answer or make any noise. He slowly turns the door handle and pushes on the door again, then takes a few steps back and walks to my neighbor's door. I heard him try theirs. My neighbor is a middle-aged man living alone. The door didn't open, and I see him walk up the stairs and can hear him trying yet another neighbor's door. This apartment has 5 people living in it, including a child. That door didn't open, and he tried the remaining door that didn't currently have anyone living in it. Failure yet again. The whole situation was just really weird and creepy. So that makes me think that maybe he didn't single me out as a vulnerable female because he just seems to be trying to get into anywhere that he can, really. I do think that it's rather strange, though, that my cats hate this guy. I have never seen either of them hiss except for when this guy was at the door. They always are clearly very frightened and are ready to fight, which is majorly unlike either of them. You honestly wouldn't even know that they have teeth or claws unless you have a cardboard box or a laser pointer or something. They're just big sooks. But with this guy, they just completely change. Anyway, back in early January, our clad in black lad is back. My brother, who looks quite intimidating, was over for a visit. He heard someone try to open my door. He got up, opened the door to see this guy actively trying to open my middle-aged neighbor's door, and this guy just ran for his life. My brother wasn't aware that this was an ongoing issue at the time, and he just thought that it was weird, and he wasn't about to try and run after this guy. Today, though, I was taking a nap at around 2 p.m, and I hear an aggressive knock on my door. It pauses for a few moments and then picks back up. While this is happening, I heard my upstairs neighbors quickly close their windows. I was tired and figured that it was this same creep, so I didn't even bother looking. After a few minutes, I heard him knocking on my neighbor's door. After that failed, he went upstairs and knocked on the 2 doors up there for a bit. After a while, the knocking stopped, and I heard my upstairs neighbors open their windows back up. I couldn't sleep anymore, so I grabbed my smokes and I headed outside. I could hear my neighbors through their open window. The little girl was asking her mum who that guy was and why he keeps doing this. And I know of him bothering them at least twice, but it could definitely be more than that. I have reported this to my landlord, but she's absolutely no help and basically just tells me to not answer the door if I feel unsafe and to call the police if it escalates. The police don't have a quick enough response time to come out here when it's happening. I did call them before, and I don't have much of a description for them to go off of. And they basically told me to not open the door if I feel unsafe and to call them if it escalates. And I mean, you would think that someone ripping my bedroom screen off would count as escalating, but I don't know. I guess not. This guy, though, has been bothering me for a little over a year now, and apparently my neighbors as well. It seems really weird for a criminal to do something like this. Just keep trying to break into the same group of apartments over and over again. And I guess that I just have no idea what he could be after.